And I think that's already overbearing the space.
Yeah, that as well as my finances.
Well, let's just say in a perfect world, and I would entertain 6.
Well, and the reason I think 6 is a better number is not only because of the size of the property, but the applicant is running this business in order to offset the cost of her horses. So if she's maintaining 2, she gets income from 4. If she's maintaining 3, she gets income from 3. So 6 would be on the outside of a reasonable number. I think 7 is even pushing it.
I'm liking 6 myself, Mr. Chairman. The question that I had when I so rudely interrupted you was, so if I had a horse boarded in your yard and I wanted to come see the horse on a Sunday, I can't?
They can't.
Okay, you said you're off on Sunday, but I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is my horse.
Right.
And I'm paying to keep it here.
Yeah. No, they know I have visiting hours, and my current boarders, anybody who comes in knows that Sundays are my day.
Okay.
So what about 6? Are we focused on 6 or some other number?
That was what was there when we were at the sidewalk, correct?
How many were there when we were?
There's 5 horses now. But there's space for 7, so if you limit me to 6, that means I have to get rid of a building because I can't afford it at 6. That's the reason I have 7 is for financial reasons. I'm still paying for all those buildings. We have excessive vet bills and feed and all that. So 7 was a determined number based on profit finances to cover my expenses and make a little bit of money. So if it's restricted to 6, I will have a 7th stall that I'm paying for and can't do anything with.
Which you can always send back, right?
I have to send back and get a new one. Because if you say I can have 6, I have 2 sets of 2 stalls and 1 set of 3. So if I have 6, one way or the other, I'm going to have to send a building back and get 1 new stall.
But you can do that because you're leasing.
Right, I can do that. I would prefer not to. Then I have to incur additional costs of sending it back and ordering a new building.
I guess my question would be, there's not much difference between 6 and 7, right?
1 horse.
1 horse. And she's set up for 7 now. She's got space for 7. We can say not to exceed 7 if we're inclined to give you the permit.
I would be total agreement on that, yes.
Ms. Mello? No. Ms. Mello is firm on this.
I could go with not to exceed 7. Special permits have to be renewed. I think at the time of renewal that if you don't show a constant number of 7, then we would reduce it because you're not using the building now.
Right.
When was the last time you had 7? Have you had 7?
I haven't had 7 yet.
You've never had 7?
No, the 3rd building only came, well, the 3rd set of stalls was delivered in May or June of this year. So I've only had 4 months with it, and then I had to level it and put up a fence and then start looking for borders. So the opportunity to have 7 has only been a short period of time.
How long have you had 6? Because you don't have 6 now.
I don't understand the question. How long have I had 6 horses?
Did you have 6?
I had 6 horses for 4 months.
Okay. So in a year and a half, out of 18 months, you had 6 for 4 months.
Right, but that was as soon as the other building came. I only had 4 stalls, so until May of 2018, I could physically only have 4. So then the 3rd building came, which allowed me for more. That's when I got the 6, and then one of them decided to move home with her horses.
I still think the building can be switched out.
And that kind of goes to my next question, which is there are 4 structures supporting this business right now. Does the board feel as if it wants to limit the number of structures in support of this business to the 4 there that are present currently?
Yes.
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 And insofar as outside lighting is concerned, I know that you mentioned to us when we were there that you were even considering putting lighting on poles that would be, those lights would be over the riding arena.
Right, so just one though.
I think that there are some folks on this board, if I'm reading the sense correctly here, who would not feel comfortable with outside lighting on poles that are elevated feet above the ground. Now, you talked to us tonight about putting outside lighting on the rear of the building.
Right. The electrician's plan is been changing, because it's a matter of the lower you put the lights, the more you're gonna have to put to light up the whole arena, or
So
the
is it
majority of the
okay to
arena.
put lighting then on the side of the barn? Is that going to hinder your business in any way if we limit it to that?
I don't think so.
Okay. A fence or some sort of green barrier was discussed amongst us as well. On the side that is closest to 11 Priscilla Mullins Way. Would you have any objections if we conditioned the grant of a special permit on the installation of a fence on that side?
I don't have any objections to that.
And finally, there was conversation about manure, which is always a wonderful topic of conversation. And I think the feeling amongst the board, again, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but listening carefully, I believe that we would feel more comfortable if there were a container that would be lidded so that we could put a cover over the manure once it's in there to suppress the odors and the insects that are going to be attracted to it. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
Yes.
I have a follow-up question on the fencing.
Yes.
Could you describe what that fence that you're putting next to your daughter's property?
If you look at that photo, it looks just like that.
It's a
Oh,
pole.
it's a stockade.
It's a stockade.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just a- yeah.
Okay.
And
Yes.
how many feet is it going to
Yeah,
be?
yeah.
It's a standard 6 foot
Six,
tall.
usually 6.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but no, length, down the side.
Gosh, I don't know how long that space is. It would just be in where the tree line was sparse between me and my neighbor. I don't know, 30, 40 feet. I don't have any idea how, I never measured it.
I mean, I don't think you would need to take it to the street, certainly.
No.
Oh, no, not in
No,
the front. I think we're just talking about in the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. I would
On
say
the
really
side, in
On
the
the
back.
side,
The driveway.
right, yeah. So at some point,
Top of the driveway.
to the top of the driveway.
No, I'm talking about
no.
how far back
Oh,
from
how
the
far back?
driveway.
Yeah.
This
Going
part
to-
of
Oh,
Wait a minute.
Gotcha. Okay, I got you.
Fran, go.
I'd like to know how many feet of fencing you will be putting up between yourself and your neighbor's backyard.
I don't know the exact number. I apologize. I don't know, 30, 40 feet. I have no idea what the number is. I've never actually measured that space. But I would go to where the tree line thickens and it's not necessary anymore.
I would like to have a number on that, just so there's no,
One is 30.
Let's inquire of the neighbors. Do you have any sense as to,
I'd say it's about 100 feet.
I was gonna say, it looks on this map, if the drawing is correct, in inches 30 feet, it's close to 90, 100 feet.
Like from the.
From the current fence line to,
Yep, from here to down beyond where your front corral is. You got 1, 2, 3.5 inches.
That's probably
An
not the
inch is-
scale.
Well, it says an inch is 30
Yeah,
feet.
but that's not scale.
I-
Going from here
we're going from here to
down
about.
to
Well,
where your
this is all,
corral is.
so right about here starts the tree line. So I wouldn't continue back there.
Yeah, you would actually, because that was real sparse in the beginning of that tree line.
Okay, well, that would involve some tree removal, put the fence up, but if that's what you wanted, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, like it'd be perfect. Okay.
Well, there was all growth between the two properties.
Yeah.
So the fence, if it did go up, you don't want to cut down the greenery that's there now. You'd find a way to put that fence in front of or behind, or, you know, I mean, you're gonna take out the weeds and stuff, but if there's trees there,
Well, that's what I'm saying, is once you hit that first set, that first corral that's marked on there, it begins thicker trees, there's more brush, it's
Right,
it's
there's
more-
brush.
Right.
But that brush all dies off in the wintertime, is what my
There's trees there
point
too.
is. So,
Can I have that folder? I have a picture of that.
Do we need to go back out and look at it?
I don't think I have a picture of that. Oh, you know what? I do. I don't know if this answers questions, but I do have a picture.
Here.
Yep.
So that's the first,
right
Oh,
here.
this is the first one.
yeah, so he's over here. So my intention was to go up to here, because right about here is this tree line thickened. So this tree is right next to that corral.
Right, I would say just to the corner of the
Well,
ground.
the abutters are here too, ask them what their thoughts are on it.
Well, let's finish our discussion up here first.
Do you guys want
Yeah,
to
you
see?
can keep it.
Yep. Right.
Eric?
What's
How many feet?
what's the difference between
The corner of the
here
corral?
and here? Yeah.
What's the length of the corral from where it starts to where it goes to the structure?
It's 40 feet.
40 feet.
I have another picture, hold up. This might actually be better, because it shows the front too.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Yep.
What's yellow? From the back corner of the corral? Back corner of the corral to where?
Top,
To the beginning of the driveway?
yeah, I think, well, it's gotta, I don't know if it's the driveway or, how far does your fence go up? Does it go to the top of the driveway now? The front
No,
fence? No?
no.
Yeah, the front, yeah.
Yes, right here.
Oh,
Right there.
okay.
That's fence, right?
So that must be the fence now. That's right there. then. Yeah,
Yep.
'cause that was, okay.
Yep.
So it'd be from the back corner of the corral to where?
That front,
Butting up to the front, to the fence where it's on the right hand.
I need a better description than that, Fran.
There's a
From the
current
back corner of the corral to where?
the existing,
meeting the existing fence.
on that property line.
To what?
Meeting the existing fence, front fence on the property line. Right there.
Mr. Clark?
Mr. Chairman?
Are you asking me a question?
Yes.
What is the question?
The question is, do you have any comment about having a fence going from the back corner of the corral to the existing fence line?
The- That's, I would go with the front corner of the corral.
I'm okay with the front corner of the corral.
You're okay with the front corner of the corral?
Yep.
Okay.
Because the corral itself is, that side of the corral is almost a,
It's almost obscured
it's a solid
anyway.
wall.
Is it solid? It's just a...
It's, yeah,
Isn't it?
No, up-
Oh, the corner of the ground, okay.
So from the front corner of the corral to the existing fence line? Is that what people are thinking?
Yes.
is that okay with
Yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Clark, is that okay?
yeah.
Okay. So I think the only thing that we still have some disagreement on is the number of horses. And I'd like to try to get Ms. Mello on board. I guess it's between 6 and 7, and most of us seem to be okay with 7, not to exceed 7, so long as we have all these other conditions in place, which should ameliorate the effects of that extra horse. You know, the lighting is going to be on the back of the barn, it's going to be focused downward, we're going to have a manure container, we're going to have a fence line.
Are we also putting the manure container over the other side of the property?
Yeah, you had that. right?
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Yeah, on the
Can you
opposite.
just show us on this?
Sure.
think it was 10 this, but I don't want to.
It's on the side
That's where
away from
Oh,
11.
yes, on this side.
So right here.
Yeah, so 11's over here, so it's over
Yeah,
there.
it's away from
Yep.
the side of 11, the far side. That way.
How long would the permit be in effect for?
Annual, I think?
Well, I think that that's a subject for a vote when the time comes, but Ms. Clark, do you have any thoughts about how long we should, if we're going to grant a special permit, how long that should be in effect for before renewal?
Special permits have to be renewed every 3 years. So if anybody's watching out there and you haven't renewed your special permit, you might want to check the dates. But we do have some flexibility on that. And to renew your special permit, it would be to come back before the board. We don't do the whole hearing. You come back within inside 6 months. But it gives us the opportunity, abutters the opportunity to see how things are going, if they're still even in operation, home businesses. My feeling here is it should be 3 years. My feeling here is to do 2 years.
Okay.
We're asking a lot of you to do. We're actually giving a lot of leeway to the fact that the town went ahead and gave you everything you asked for. They should have had the superior knowledge and the superior guidance. And in the absence of however it happened, whether our planners weren't, talking on the same page, or if we even had one at the time, I think we can't punish you for that.
Okay.
But I do think we can have some leeway over a new inspection.
Yeah.
We could go as low as 1 year, but we're going into the winter time, and
Right.
you don't have enough time to get all this done. I think we might give you suggestions on how to order things. But my feeling would be 2 years.
Okay. Does anyone have anything further before I entertain a motion to close the hearing?
I'm liking the 2 years. Going back to the fence, I'd like you to also add that I think that fence location works fine, but I don't want to see you knock down any of those big trees.
Yeah,
Put
I
that
don't-
fence up.
Right, well, that
So-
kind of defeats the purpose.
Exactly,
Yeah,
so I'd
no.
like to see you remove as little green as
Yeah.
you can in order to achieve that.
Yeah, that was a personal goal anyways, something we were doing.
So I just don't want you to strip clear that area
No.
there and stick a fence up, which will make it even worse.
Well,
Right,
she could also move the fence 5 feet inside.
That's what I'm thinking.
right,
so.
yeah. Well, the only thing is if you were requiring me to go further past the start of the corral, I'd run into an issue, but if we just go up to the corral.
I think you
definitely
can put the
doable.
fence there without
Yeah.
cutting down.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's all I need.
I think we're done up here. Yes? Yes? I'll entertain brief comments from the public if anybody wants to be heard.
I like her idea. 6 horses, not 7.
Anybody
5 would
else?
be better, but,
Identify yourself for the record.
oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan Dunn, 11 Priscilla Mullins Way.
Anybody else like to be heard? Do I hear a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The board, in my opinion, needs to make a number of findings on this case. So I'm going to tick through them one by one. We'll take votes on each one. If anybody has any points of discussion they'd like to make after a motion is made to accept these findings and seconded, I'll entertain that discussion. The first finding, the board finds that pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3, the board has authority to require a special permit under the specific circumstances of this case, as the subject lot is less than 5 acres in a residential agricultural district. Do I hear a motion to accept that finding?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Next, the board finds that the right to farm bylaw at section 9.5.3 of the general bylaws of the town does not impose any land use regulation which is properly the subject of state statute, regulation, or zoning law.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, the board finds that the right to farm bylaw may not be used to override or modify subjects regulated by existing zoning bylaws.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The board finds that the benefits of the proposed use outweigh its detrimental impacts on the town and the neighborhood in view of the particular characteristics of the site and of the proposal in relation to that site.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Be fast.
Do I hear a motion to grant the special permit with conditions, which I will identify after this vote is taken?
So moved.
Second.
Do I, okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the special permit is granted. Let's talk about the conditions.
Okay.
This special permit is granted with the following conditions. First, that your hours of operation are Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Second, the number of horses that may be kept on the property is not to exceed 7. And I know there may be some discussion about that in a minute. Third, the number of structures used in support of the business is limited to the 4 that are on the property currently. Fourth, outside lighting on these structures is to be angled downward at all times, and no lighting may be placed on elevated poles.
Okay.
Fifth, a fence shall be installed from the front corner of the corral to the existing fence line that is closest to 11 Priscilla Mullins Way.
Yeah.
6, a manure container with a lid shall be installed at the rear of the subject property on the side away from 11 Priscilla Mullins Way.
Northwest corner.
I beg your pardon?
Northwest corner.
Northwest corner, for the side away from 11 Priscilla Mullins Way, so we know what we're talking about. And no manure may be kept or piled outside this container. Does anyone else have any other conditions?
We were emptying the container more often in the summertime.
Well, I would imagine at some point, Ms. Mello, it's going to get full. She's then going to have to empty the container, because part of this condition is that no manure may be kept or piled outside the container.
Right, but how long does it take to fill up?
How long does it take to fill up?
Depends on how many horses you have.
That's a good answer.
I condition it to once a week in the summertime.
That's not a lot.
You know,
You give us some guidance here.
all I can say is I run a business and then I run another business. I'm a single mom. I will empty it as much as I possibly can. I mean,
I think if we say as needed, is that sufficiently clear for everybody?
Can you define what as needed means?
It's hard to say because the horses come and go from her property.
Well, I get that, but, I mean, how large is the container? I just don't want to see the container be big enough that you can sit it there for a month and a half.
Oh,
That's
no.
my point.
no, the gentleman that wants to put a dumpster there, his requirement is that it's emptied at least once a month because the urine and materials rot the bottom. But that we're talking about a 30-yard container. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just using that for reference. The urine will ruin whatever container that it's in. so
And a
you have to do
30-yard
it.
container is huge.
Right, but I'm not getting a 30-yard container. I'm working on a small dump trailer that I can tow on my own truck. Because that would be the
How you
easiest
gonna
for
put a
me.
lid on that?
Well, I'd have to get a container. I'd have to put it from the container to the dump truck or the dump trailer to get it out of there.
I would like to limit the size of the container so that it's emptied at least every other week.
I'll go with 2 weeks.
Ms. Myers, is that reasonable?
I will empty it every 2 weeks.
And we're limiting that to the summer months.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
feed them a lot. I would just don't feed them a lot in the summer.
This may seem like a lot, and it does to me, but let me just say this. You're the only one in the neighborhood that has this number of horses. There are others in the neighborhood that have horses, and that's fine. But you're the only one that's also running a business in the neighborhood. So, as has been referenced earlier in this discussion, the horse sort of left the barn on us, no pun intended, because permits were being awarded to you without you coming before us initially, for which I personally don't blame you. And I know other members of the board up here are sympathetic to that situation which developed. So now we kind of have to try to put the lid back on things. Again, no pun intended. That metaphors tonight. So every 2 weeks during the summer, but keep that container there all year round.
Oh, absolutely,
With a
yeah.
lid. So those were the conditions. I ask for a motion to condition the grant of the special permit to these conditions that I just specified.
Does that include the renewal?
Does that include the renewal? No, we'll do that next.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, we're done with the conditions, and now we need to talk about the length of your special permit.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion from anybody about the length of the special permit to be granted?
I'd make a motion that we grant the first permit for 2 years.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, the horse is back in the barn. You get your special permit, it's good for 2 years with
Okay.
these conditions.
Okay.
I've begun to work on the decision already, which is why I sounded organized tonight. Sometimes I'm not so organized, but I'll get this written up and filed, God willing, by the end of the week.
Okay.
By Friday, by Monday. And then anybody who wants to appeal this would then have 20 days. So,
My question is, how many horses?
7.
Seven.
No, not
I
to
thought we were
exceed
gonna
7.
talk about that.
Not to exceed 7.
Now we're gonna talk about that.
Well, we did talk about it, you talked about
Yeah.
it, both tonight and before you talked about it. And these conditions are designed to moderate any effects on your property, meaning the fence line, and the lighting, and the manure container, and all these things. We are recognizing the concerns that you folks had, and we're trying to deal with it as best we can, while not putting her out of business in the meantime. So I hope everybody appreciates the balance we've tried to obtain in this case. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And again, if there's any issues with regard to any concerns arising from the operation of this business, I'm sure you know where to call and what to do about it. The special permit, as you heard, is good for 2 years.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Great.
Thank you for your observations as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody need to take a break? Okay, next case. Need to take a break?
I'm good.
Can you go like this?
We had a bet on the time.
Moving along. Next case is case number 127-10-1, the petitioner being Rosenbuds LLC, requesting a variance pursuant to Article 27 zoning bylaw changes, Section 5000.5, subparagraph 2, location and dimensional controls, so as to allow a non-medical marijuana establishment within 500 feet of a religious facility. The property is located at 318 Tremont Street in Carver. That's Assessor's Map 127, Lot 10-1 in the Industrial A District. Now, I'm going to speak from the chair, as I did the last time when we had a marijuana case, the one that we disposed of earlier this evening. And I'm going to say what I said the last time. I noticed some new faces here. And I also noticed that Area 58 is here with us now and filming. Good evening. There will be a time allowed for public comment. I'm very liberal about that, and we do want to hear from folks who have concerns or issues, either opposed to a petition or in favor of. but we will not be getting into any discussions this evening about whether the legalization or use of marijuana for personal purposes is appropriate social policy or not. To continue with my bad metaphors, that horse has already left the barn,
I
right?
knew that was coming.
The state has already voted, all of us have voted to allow the usage of non-medical marijuana for recreational purposes. And we're not going to revisit that vote. That's way beyond our pay grade here. It's outside of our purview and outside of our legal analysis. So for those of you who have significant ethical or moral issues around this particular policy change that was affected by a vote of Commonwealth back, I think, in 2014 or so, and then again more recently, you'll just have to understand that we're not going to be going there tonight. Now, having said that, do we have anybody here tonight from Rosenbud's? Yes, sir. And can you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, sir. I'm Attorney Blake Mensing, representing Rosenbud's.
And where's your office, Mr. Mensing?
Holliston, Massachusetts.
Very good. Would you like to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead.
Would you prefer I sit or stand? Or?
Whichever you're comfortable doing.
Okay.
That's right, Mensa.
Mensing, yes.
Can you spell that for her, please?
Uh-huh.
The shorthand is, my sister always says, think of a male choir. Men sing.
Oh, I like it.
Very good. Well, Mr. Mensing, proceed.
I appreciate it. I'm just going to give you a quick background on who I am, because I think it lends some context to what I am going to present. So I am a full-time cannabis attorney. I exclusively represent cannabis businesses before various local boards and at the state licensure board, the Cannabis Control Commission. I'm also a former municipal attorney. I used to represent 7 towns throughout the Commonwealth as associate town council. I've also been a local regulator myself as a conservation commissioner, so I have the utmost respect for municipal law and regulatory authority at the local level. So with that said, as the chair correctly noted, we are seeking a variance from the town of Carver's bylaw here. There's a statutory test found in MGL Chapter 48, Section 10, which sets the floor and the ceiling of what you may decide as a board. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. I just want to go over it briefly so I can address how I think this property is entitled to such a variance. So I won't read the entire statute, but the long and the short of it is essentially the Zoning Board of Appeals has the power to grant a variance, which is a slight deviation from the strict letter of the bylaw as written, whenever there's a property that has something unique about it in terms of its soil conditions, the shape, the topography of the land, or in this case, the structures on the land. The other half of that coin, basically a literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would have to work a substantial hardship, whether it's financial or otherwise, on the applicant. And that relief may be granted from that literal interpretation without a substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of such an ordinance. So under the state regulations, 935 CMR 500 at SEC, there's a baseline buffer. There's a single measuring stick under the state regulations, and that is 500 feet from a public or private K through 12 school. That is different from the standard under the Department of Public Health, which used to have the regulatory purview over the state's medical program. That's since been absorbed by the Cannabis Control Commission, but essentially they copied and pasted their regulations. And the reason I bring up that prior regulatory framework is they had a sort of amorphous phrase that there was a buffer required from places where children commonly congregate.
Well, we're talking about a religious facility here, so let's focus on that.
That's correct. So if you'll indulge me just a minute. So when you look at a buffer, the goal is to provide distance, separation, both physical and in terms of the use. So what we're looking at here is a matter of 25 yards on the corner of a lot at 318 Tremont Street. It has 2 buildings on it. The driveway that would serve as the access point to this adult use cannabis retail establishment is over 500 feet away from the church property at 307. So what you have here is you have a physical buffer of an intervening building being across the street, meaning if you were to stand in the driveway of 318, you're going to have a building and then a distance of about 425 feet from the lot line, and then again above 500 from the driveway itself. So part of the variance statutory language allows for conditions to be imposed relating to basically time, place, or manner restrictions. So in this case, the goal is to, I assume, protect against basically non-cannabis users from having to see a cannabis establishment from their property, from protecting children if there were children on the property. I don't know if there are children's services or not, but we're talking about probably in the neighborhood of 6 hours worth of weekly time when there are congregants on the site. And certainly the pastor, I believe, is in the audience, may correct me if I'm wrong. What I would propose is, given the fact that there is a power to condition time, I think the easy solution would be to, and I've discussed this with my client, to prohibit the facility from being open during currently scheduled services. So this is about measurements on a map. If this property were 501 feet away, and there was nothing in between this property and the church's property, we wouldn't be here before you. So I certainly understand the intent behind it. I think
How
that
many
will
feet do
be
you
met.
say you need?
Pardon?
How many feet do you say you need for your variance?
75 feet. And we've actually investigated, I'm trying to, this is, maybe you'll appreciate this as an attorney, there's a process by which you can acquire land by adverse possession. I have done some research into figuring out if there's a way to abandon that 75 feet. Thus far, I have come up dry. But it is literally the corner of the lot that's abutting, I guess, the prior applicants, the now withdrawn application. So we were sort of operating under the assumption that they wouldn't be willing purchasers of the 75 feet. But that is an exploration that we would be looking to do, certainly under zoning law. Lots that are adjacent under common ownership get merged for zoning purposes. So it wouldn't, frankly, do them any good if they still wanted to attempt to get that variance. But we're looking at a different order of magnitude here. The other applicant was looking for a 50% deviation from the bylaw. We're looking for about 15%. And again, the distance from the actual entrance where, because of the security regulations, there's not going to be any loitering. So the people entering and exiting the facility will be over 500 feet away. The building itself, where the retail establishment would be located, is closer to 900 feet away from the structure of the church. So that is that in a nutshell. One other point I was going to make. So also, yeah, we have to look at the number of people impacted. I reviewed the footage from the prior hearing on the first. I heard that the pastor and his family lives there, so I understand that they have some additional concerns. However, there is no residential buffer in the bylaw itself, so I don't know that would be a factor that you could consider. However, the total number of parishioners here is hovering between 40 and 50, and it sounds like about half of those, 25 or so, are Carver residents. So certainly local bylaws are intended to protect local residents. So what we're looking at is 75 feet potentially working to prevent, under a literal interpretation of the bylaw, the operation of a business that is otherwise legal under every standard.
All right, let me get done. I don't want to jump on your time here. But let's talk about the threshold, the 48 threshold issues, rather than why this is a good idea. What is unusual about the soil conditions or distinctive about the soil conditions, if anything?
I don't think there's anything unique about the soil.
What about the topography?
No, it's just flat. I think
What about shape?
No, again, I don't think that's the run. I think it's about the structures.
How do we get to the merits of this case without satisfying one or more of the 3 threshold issues under Massachusetts general law?
The word "or" right after land goes land or structures. So the structures, again, going to the intent behind the buffer is to provide a screening mechanism, some space, some breathing room. You have that in the driveway being located outside of that buffer. You have that in the physical building interceding between the subject property of the applicant and the religious facility.
Did you bring a map or anything with you?
I did.
They're separated into 3 pages. So the big one, yeah.
Are you measuring land to land, or are you measuring structure to structure?
I measured both. So land to land from the corner, I'm sorry, I have terrible directions, whatever I don't know if it's southerly or not, but the bottom corner on the map, as you look at it, of the 307 property, from that line to the very closest point of 318 is almost exactly 425 feet. This is color-coded one, and forgive me for not blowing it up in advance. This here is the church property. The building of the church is closer to this end here. Again, I'm going to call it north. I don't know if it actually is north or not. This lot here has 2 structures on it. The closer structure here would not be used for a retail establishment. On the, again, I'm going to call it the southerly side, is where the target building is. So from this corner here to this corner here is 425 feet. From this corner to the driveway is over 500 feet. And from building to building, it's about 900 feet total.
I want to go back to something that I inquired about a minute ago, which is the 48 threshold.
Sure.
And your argument that the words or structures are present in section 10. I'm going to read to you from section 10, which I know you're familiar with, but I'm going to read it for those folks at home and those who are present and listening. It says that the permit granting authority shall have the power, the permit granting authority shall have the power after public hearing to grant a variance if the permit granting authority specifically finds that owing to circumstances relating to the soil conditions, shape, or topography of such land or structures. Now, it seems to me that the words "or structures" relate back to the topography issue, the way this language is phrased in section 10. Can you address that for me?
I think that there would have been an Oxford comma in there to separate those. I think you have to find something that's not standard on the ground physically, whether that be the physical ground itself or the structures. So again, if you go back to the intent behind the buffer, it's to provide screening, it's to provide breathing room. It's to say this use shouldn't occur this close to this particular thing. And that's why I think the intervening structure, as well as the physical access point being outside of the buffer, is meeting the spirit of that distance to a T.
Well, I think your argument is creative on the issue of whether you can pass by the threshold of 40A, section 10. I'll reserve judgment as to whether I'm accepting that argument as I throw this meeting open to the rest of the board members.
I'm going to give my opinion of the structures issue, in that the zoning board handles many types of variances, and a lot of them have to do with the house or the structure. So when it says relating to the topography or structures, I'm thinking of the building that's, the garage that somebody wants to put up that's 5 feet too close to the property line. That's how I'm interpreting that, as opposed to your interpretation right now. You're basically talking about the door upon which the cannabis store would be to the door of the church, which, let me finish, would be an enormous leap here because we do lot line to lot line. You understand that? So get me over that.
Sure. So the goal of a buffer, again, is to provide space. It's to provide screening. It's to provide people the opportunity to have things that they don't expect to occur in the zone
So you're giving a definition of what, or the intent of what the buffer zone should be.
That's right. So part of the way you can grant relief is by meeting the intent or the spirit of the buffer. Again, I cited to the state's line in the sand about what you measure from, and the only measuring stick that they afford is from a K through 12 school. I think that makes perfect sense. The legal age to purchase adult use cannabis is 21 plus, as it is for alcohol.
But aren't all variances breaking the buffer? It's either a dimensional buffer, a side lot buffer, a frontage buffer.
I think with cannabis, this is a little different than a garage, on a side yard setback, that kind of thing. I think that there's...
But the definition is the same.
That's correct.
The definition of what?
The definition is basically the same. You're using the dimensional tables and the dimensional table in the bylaw, 500 feet, as a buffer zone, and what the intent of the buffer zone is. But isn't every dimensional a buffer zone, 60 feet between houses, or?
I think that there is a unique element because of the novelty of cannabis, because of the, frankly, federally propaganda-fueled fear of the
So
plant.
this is an exception within an exception?
No, I think you can absolutely hang your hat on the fact that the intent of protecting people, which in my view is, frankly, doesn't make sense, but we're not here, that's because the bylaw is what it is. But the goal at town meeting by approving that buffer, again, was to say, we need some space. We're talking about 75 feet, we're talking about 25 yards at the corner of the property that is, obviously all lot lines are lines drawn on the map. Here, if this property were literally 75 feet closer, or if the rest of it were 500 feet away, we would not be here. The
I get
issue
that, and
is-
that's the discussion we had with the previous applicant during their hearing, is that find a space that's not 75 feet too close.
So I think you should be
Or find a space where the land of that space has an unusual or distinctive shape, or unusual or distinctive topography, or unusual or distinctive soil. We're not making any of this up, and you know better than anybody in this room that these are the precursors that have to be satisfied before we have legal cover to grant a variance.
So, I have heard from a great number of municipal boards is why don't you just go somewhere else? And unfortunately, the reality is when you have an overlay district drawn on a zoning map, it limits you. And you cannot force someone, unless you are the government, to be divested from their property. So it takes two to tango, and certainly, as I said, I think the fact that the other applicant was here, I think that was a much harder road to sled because of, it was literally 50% and it was just across the street.
It was further.
You could throw a stone across it.
Correct, but the state law requirement remains the same. It's cast in stone. It's soil topography or shape. Now, I want you to understand, and I want to speak again from the chair, I've been doing that more than I really want to, but there's no one on this board that is holding to the position that because of the nature of this business and because of any personal feeling or objection that we might have towards this business, that we want you to go elsewhere. We're not in our backyard kind of people. If you've got the cover for us to break this bylaw, then we do it based upon the requirement under Section 1048. You know this?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that you've made some very creative arguments. I know that Ms. Clark has been heard, and I've been speaking too much, so I want to open this up to the rest of the board at this point for any of their questions or comments.
Can I just have the plan passed down?
Did you have other material that you wanted to pass out?
I do. The client here did the map, so I have not actually had a chance to review them, so I'm not precisely sure what, I don't know.
So I asked the town for the overlay district itself for the retail, and
What is your name?
I'm Rob Rosen, Rosen Buds, I'll work there. I'm the
And your
site,
address, for the record.
150 Plain Street, Taunton, Mass. I've asked the town clerk, that's what the bylaws read, that they should have a version of the map. They didn't have a version of the map, so I just made the version myself, kind of. That's the colored map. The other map, that's a satellite version of Google, has the radius of 500 foot on the property line for the church. That shows the very small corner that our property is affected.
Are you asking for a version of the assessor's map?
The zoning
No.
overlay map is not.
Oh, the overlay map.
Yeah,
Oh,
and MOD/R.
Yeah, we have one of those.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
And then the big one is the site plan itself.
So, who am I talking to? So you're saying there's two I'm not actually familiar with the property, but there's two buildings on the property, are they,
So,
who am I talking to?
They're perpendicular to the
Oh, so
street.
they're side by side, no?
No, they're probably in the neighborhood of 300 or so feet apart with an intervening
Are
driveway.
they side by side or front to back?
there's a picture of it.
Is that the,
Yes, that is it. But the orange circle map actually shows the Google satellite photo of it. That's probably a lot easier to understand than a site plan.
which, oh, over here, so, oh, they're not even in the circle.
That's right.
That's kind of the argument.
That's the point we're
That's
trying.
easy.
So yeah, it's, I don't know the area of the overage of that 500 foot buffer, but it's 75 linear feet.
Got it, okay. So these are the two buildings.
That's correct, and the proposed establishment would be on the farther building.
Okay.
So it would be on this building here.
That's correct.
Does anybody else up here have any questions or comments?
Oh, I do.
Mr. Jermaine?
I take exception to K through 12, and you're telling us what the state says. The town voted that it not go near a church. So I have no concern at all from your statement of K through 12. I also have no concern about your 15%, we're only looking for a little tiny bit. The reason I have no concern for that is because this is a brand-new bylaw that was just passed by town meeting. And if town meeting had said, we want 500 feet, but if the guy's within 10 or 15%, go ahead. They didn't do that. They said 500 feet. There could have been a motion made at town meeting to make it 250 feet. They didn't do that. This is brand spanking new. This was, I understand it's in the overlay district. I understand it's inconvenient to have a church there, but it is what it is. I agree with the chair that I don't see topography, I don't see lot configuration, it's flat as a pancake, and I don't feel that I'm prepared to slap town meeting vote in the face. That's about it.
Ms. Mello, do you have anything further?
No.
Mr. Mueller?
I do not.
At this time, Ms. Clark?
I think I mean, is there any case law on the, basically structure to structure, as far as zoning variances?
I haven't had a chance to review such case law.
You might want to. I mean, as far as anyone ever granted that,
I don't know. I don't know today.
okay.
All right, Mr. Mincing, thank you. You may sit for a little bit.
Thank you. I have just one quick question to ask my client about one piece of information.
Absolutely, we'll hold.
So it's come to our attention that the church property may actually be for sale. So I don't know if there's a representative from the church itself that's willing to comment on that. Obviously, it's a moot point until that sale is consummated, but certainly that would influence our decision to continue pursuing the variance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Members of the public, We are very interested in hearing from any of you who would like to make some comments about this, either in favor of or in opposition to. Keeping in mind, again, that we're not going to be getting into discussions about social policy, okay? This is a zoning issue. So having said that, I'm opening the floor to anybody who would like to speak. Yes, sir, could you please identify yourself? I know who you are, but identify yourself, please, and your address.
We're famous now, I guess. Pastor Barry from the Bridge Church.
And your first name, Pastor, is?
Barry.
And your last name is?
Hansen.
H-A-N-S-E-N?
S-O-N.
So
Swedish.
that is right for our clerk.
No worries. 307 Tremont Street.
Proceed.
As with the former situation, our position would be to oppose the variance.
Is there a reason for your opposition outside of ethical and moral concerns, which I know you have,
Yep.
but outside?
That's personal.
Yes.
Just the vote of town meeting. As we stated last month, we would request the board to uphold the will of town meeting at their vote.
Uphold the variance, or uphold the bylaw as written,
Correct.
following the vote of the town.
In legally speak, yes, correct, which I am not. As far as sale of property,
You don't have to comment on that?
Okay.
You don't want to, that's entirely up to you.
sir, we have absolutely no formal offers on the property, so that's all we would have to say about that.
Thank you. Well, you'd like to be heard. Nobody else?
No.
Yes.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Laura McNamara. I live at number 246 Tremont Street.
Hi, Laura.
And Tremont Street, Wareham Street, Church Street, this is my neighborhood. These folks will close up shop and go to Taunton, but this is my home here. And I would like just to pass this around. My concerns are safety concerns. I understand.
Just move a little bit to your right.
Yes, I
Because the camera's
understand.
in back of you, and we want to make sure that
I
everybody
just want
sees
to
you.
pass this around. This is the number of accidents that we've had on Tremont
Can you
Street.
hand that over to us?
Yes, from June to August. I have a lot of concerns.
Is this on all of Tremont? That's a long road. I mean, it goes from Wareham to Plymouth.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. My husband and I actually had somebody up near New England Farms come at us head-on. Now, I don't know who I'm supposed to speak to, but currently right now there is a broken yellow sign. You can pass on Tremont Street, and that should not be happening. I can stand in my kitchen window, and I stand in my kitchen and look out the window and watch, and I'm not a spokesperson for the bus drivers, but I think actually the Carver Public School bus drivers should get hazardous duty pay. Anybody doing the route on Tremont Street, they have to stop those buses. They have to let children out. We do not have crosswalks. We do not have sidewalks. Those bus drivers, when they try to come out of Church Street and hang a left, or if they try to come out of Wareham Street and hook a left, they can't. 18-wheelers, there's all kinds of scenarios happening on Tremont Street. You have 18-wheelers going back and forth from CMAS. You have people trying to cut out in front of an 18-wheeler because they don't want to be behind an 18-wheeler. We have all kinds of issues, and these are all that's just from June to August, all those
So if
accidents.
I understand you, you are opposed to this because of traffic issues on that road.
I don't think, okay, I understand the marijuana thing is here to stay, and this is what people want. Tremont Street right now is being completely overburdened. We have Wareham Crossing. It is a thoroughfare. It's a thoroughfare for Middleborough, it's a thoroughfare for Wareham. We have kids, little kids now, coming out of Wareham Street and Church Street. They ride up, and they ride and they get ice cream at the ice cream place. They go to Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know how much more we can handle on Tremont Street without some sort of safety structure. We have, like I said, we don't have crosswalks, we don't have sidewalks, and there are a lot of people on bikes. We have moms, we actually have mothers that wheel their babies in carriages up Tremont Street.
Okay, I think we get the point. There are serious, in your mind, serious
Yeah.
traffic issues,
And
public safety issues.
I happen to be a big fan of the church. I love the church.
Laura,
So-
can you spell your last name, please?
Spell your last name for us.
McNamara, McNamara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Who else would like to be heard? Yes, ma'am. Identify yourself for the record, please.
Dawn Marie Foran, 278 South Meadow Village. So I have been a resident of the town for recently, a short while, but I have a concern. And my concern is we had the town meeting, and the people in this town have voted not to allow anything different than what we have before us. And I represent the town on different other committees, and I feel that we should uphold what the town wants and not give a variance on anything. And that's just my opinion. And as a Christian, I also think that the facility shouldn't have a marijuana facility.
Okay,
there.
now we're getting into social policy. We're not going to go there.
I'm not, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who else would like to be heard? Nobody? Well, thank you all for coming. We've had a spirited debate, and I want at this point to inquire once more of the board if they have any follow-up questions or comments they'd like to make at this time.
I don't know if this would be in order or not, Mr. Chairman, but your statement that you heard through the grapevine that the church is for sale, and if that does happen, this whole thing becomes an act in futility, you don't need it. Would you prefer that this get continued until you find out what's going on? Is that what your next step would be? Or do you want to push this to a vote tonight? Well, I don't know that a vote isn't going to happen.
And to follow on to that question, we don't want you to have to make any decisions on the fly. If you want to step outside with your client for a few minutes, we can begin the next case, and then when we see you come back in, we can take you right away.
We do not need the time. We would like it to be continued, please.
You would like it continued?
Yes, sir.
Do we want to schedule a site walk?
I have not heard anybody ask for a site walk yet, so I'd like to hear from somebody who would like a site walk.
Well, we were going to site walk the other one, so I just assumed we were going to site walk this one.
Does anybody want to do a site walk?
Let's go.
You want to share?
Oh, come on.
I'd like nothing better to do a site walk.
Nobody asked you.
Oh, sorry.
Don't we have an agreement that
We
if
had so
someone
much
says
fun the
that-
last, at the horse farm.
At the horse farm. Okay, I guess we're doing the site walk.
Okay, Mr. Mensing, our policy here is if one of us wants to do a site walk, the rest of us go.
Thanks a lot.
So, is that okay with you folks?
Absolutely.
This would happen before our next meeting, which generally they happen like every 30 days. So is that okay? It won't be too burdensome?
That sounds great. You guys great? I'd love for you to look at the site.
All right, let's discuss a date. Usually you do them on a Saturday morning,
Even better.
because we like the overtime pay.
November 2nd or 9th is good for me, Mr. Chairman.
I'm glad I heard from you first, Mr. Kennedy.
Well, I knew you would be. My pleasure.
I'm not available the weekend of the 9th.
All right, so the 9th is off for you, Eric, right? You good for the 2nd? Because Mr. Jermaine is good for the second.
Well, because we're coming into Thanksgiving.
That's this coming Saturday.
That's this coming
Oh, I'm
Saturday.
not here. I'm sorry, I'm away this week.
All right, so the second doesn't, the second doesn't work for you. The 9th doesn't work for him.
16th?
16th.
That's hazardous waste day.
I'm gone.
Oh, boy.
I'm gone on the
What about in
16th.
shifts?
What about, is there a day during the week that anybody wants to try to get together on this?
No.
Do you want to set the date for our next meeting
And then work around it.
and then work around
We
that?
could try
If you were
that.
to stagger it, you would avoid the open meeting law issues of posting to having all of you at the same place at the same time.
No, we don't do that.
No, we don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no deliberation that occurs during these site walks, so we don't
We
want to
just-
follow the open meeting law.
We
It's
just walk.
We post it for anybody who wants to come. That's it.
Understood.
If everybody else can do this Saturday, I will take a ride down there and look at it before the next meeting.
Aren't you nice?
Just trying to
Thinking I might have
accommodate
to
the
send a
board.
subpoena.
Well, I agree. Let's set the next date of the meeting.
Oh, wait. Sharon, are you good on the 2nd?
I think so.
Okay, and we know that Mr. Jermaine is good on the 2nd
Talk to
because
the
he
powers that be.
said, are you good on the 2nd? So I think everybody here is good on the 2nd, and Ms. Miller will make the sacrifice to come. Where does this go? This goes in there.
What time?
Oh, no, I can't come in a second, but I will.
She'll get that.
I'll get down here before the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
9 a.m.?
9 a.m. on the 2nd.
That's this coming Saturday,
Yep.
okay?
If I may ask the date of the hearing?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Thank you.
We have to negotiate amongst ourselves, Mr. Newsom.
Understood.
First, of course, we have to negotiate with Mr. Jermaine.
Stop it.
So, what works best for people? We do this usually on a Tuesday evening.
I would say the 3rd or the 10th.
I would say probably the 19th, because the last one's Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, you're not
It's
gonna do
probably
that.
crazy.
Probably not gonna go
No,
Thanksgiving.
she's talking
Oh, no,
about
I'm
December.
talking about December.
You're not gonna have any meeting in November?
December 3rd.
I guess.
Or we could do, see, what's throwing this off is Thanksgiving is very late this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving's the 28th.
Well, we could have it the 26th.
No,
What about, Eric, when are you going?
Come back then.
Are you back from
Yeah.
killing something?
We can do the 26th. Does the 26th work for you, Ms. Mello? Does the 26th work for you? No. So that's out.
That's Thanksgiving
that's
week.
Thanksgiving.
What about the 19th? Who couldn't make it on the 19th?
Is that enough time?
How about the 20th? We could do a Wednesday. How about the 21st? We could do a
I can do any
No, I
time the
can't
week
do the
before
20th.
Thanksgiving
20th 's
or
gonna be a
any time the
conflict.
week after Thanksgiving.
What do you say there, Mr. Mueller?
I'm open that week.
What's the date there we're looking at?
It should be the week before Thanksgiving.
So the 19th?
Somebody had something on the 19th, did
No, the
they?
19th is good. The 20th would be a conservation meeting.
19th is good.
We'd be amenable with a meeting in
19th is
December,
good.
just in case you,
Yeah, you need more time?
I think that might be beneficial. Again, if this property is
Is
sold
is
to a
the
non-
petitioner requesting a little bit more time?
Yes, if we could have to the first week in December.
Okay, I'm prepared to give you that time. So December, let's go to December.
December 3rd?
December 3rd.
That would be a selectmen's meeting upstairs.
So
Not that it makes any
Not
big
the-
difference, I guess.
Which one of us has to be?
Yeah, that's right.
December 3rd?
Yes.
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 Ms. Clark?
I'm good.
Okay.
Sure.
So, I'll entertain a
Fran,
motion.
that's the week after Thanksgiving, so.
Yep.
Yes.
You still good? Okay.
I'll entertain a motion at this time to schedule a site visit at 9 a.m. on November 2.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will now entertain a motion to continue this case to our next date, which will be scheduled for December 3
So moved.
at 7 p.m. in this room. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So you have your dates.
Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Got it.
9 a.m.
Time for you to
Supper now, yeah, I know, I need one.
Everybody good, or does somebody need a break?
Looking for supper, yeah.
All set? All right, let's keep going.
You get two of them.
Our next case for the evening is public hearing case number 50-A and 10A, the petitioner being Sunrays Development LLC, requesting a variance pursuant to sections 2230 and 5222 of the Carver zoning bylaw for property located at 0 Fuller Street in Carver, the assessors map 50, lots 8 and 10A, seeking a variance for minimum 150 linear feet of frontage for property with approximately 40 linear feet of frontage along Forest Street for a proposed 5 megawatt large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation in a residential agricultural area. I observe some people here with some audio-visual aids and a tripod, which is always good.
I did bring my own easel, but I can just as easily use the town's one if that's okay with the board.
And I would like to read into the record at this point a letter received from the building commissioner dated September 3, addressed to Sarah Stearns of Beals and Thomas, who will be presenting this evening on behalf of the petitioner. This letter reads as follows. When reviewing your application for the solar project for 5 megawatt ground-mounted system off of Fuller Street, it seems to have only 40 feet of frontage, and the town bylaw requires 150 per section 2320. Therefore, a variance from the Board of Appeals will be required under section 5222 of the town bylaws to continue with this project. Do you have a copy of this letter?
I do.
It was addressed to you. I'm glad that you have it. Identify yourself for the record.
For the record, Sarah Stearns with Beals and Thomas, representing the applicant Sunrays Development LLC.
What's a PWS?
It's a professional wetland scientist certification, although I do go beyond that. I represent applicants of all different development and conservation projects with multiple boards at the local level, including Conservation Commission, planning boards, boards of health.
We've seen you here before.
Yes, and ZBAs, as well as state and federal regulatory agencies, so a wide swath of permitting requirements.
Go.
With me tonight is the landowner, Van Johnson. So we're both available to answer questions, but I'd like to just give an overview of what we're here for tonight. So thank you for your time and thank you for having us. Our petition for variance was filed late August. It sounds like the board has been very busy with many petitions, so here we are advertising the Carver Reporter for October 11th and 18th. And a butter notification was coordinated with the planning department staff. As Mr. Chairman read, we are here for a petition for variance under sections 2230 and 5222 of the zoning bylaw for map 50, lots 8 and 10A, which comprise approximately 213 acres of agricultural land near the Middleborough Carver town lines. This is an overview, an aerial photo showing the red line is the property line. It's actually made up of 2 lots. And the entirety of the area is about 213 acres. So we're looking at, ultimately, not that it's really the subject of our conversation tonight, but to consider a potential solar project on a very portion of that 213 acres. So just, that's a big area, so I don't want everyone to get worried about that. As the application noted, the existing property, though large, actually only has about 40 feet of frontage as it exists today along Forest Street. So this is highlighted on our map. It's the same one you have in your package. And we've added a few notes here just to help orient the board.
We have met, since this was kind of a question, it's not a proposal for a commercial building, residential building, it's a solar project. And the question arose as we were trying to develop our preliminary application if the frontage requirement pertained to solar. So I actually met with the planning director, met with the building commissioner to discuss this before we put our application together, just to see if it was actually necessary. It was a little bit ambiguous, but we all sort of collectively decided that it made sense to go through this process, just to make sure that we kind of covered all bases. I actually have also met informally with the planning board and had a brief discussion with them and let them know that this project would be coming for a site plan review special permit, if successful, tonight with the ZBA in terms of the frontage relief required. I've also met with Carver Fire Department since access is often a question with a lot of these potential solar projects, particularly on existing agricultural land. So they proactively took a ride out there, got back to me and said they have no issue with the accessibility of the site, regardless of frontage. As you know, that the emergency services doesn't necessarily enter a site where the frontage actually is, and in this case it is in two different places. So if successful after tonight's discussion, the plan would be to conduct the necessary permitting for the proposed project as that becomes refined, and formalize an access easement, which is utilized today for the egress and access to the Cranberry Bog and earth removal operation that's currently going on today.
Ms. Stearns, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
You've heard discussion of Chapter 48,
Yes.
Section 10, and I know from other cases you're very familiar with the requirements. I refer to these as threshold requirements. Soil, shape, topography.
Yes.
What is unusual or distinctive about this property that would allow us to break the bylaw and give you the variance that you request?
It's my next section of notes, so I'm getting to that, thank you. I did outline that in your package with our application. The soil, I'm turning it this way since that's how I had the orientation of the aerial photo. The soil condition on this site, again, it's a very large site used predominantly for agricultural purposes. So it consists of almost entirely cranberry bogs or vegetated, naturally occurring wetland resource areas. This is a very, very wet site, meaning there's very little opportunity for access from a public way. So the soil conditions are almost entirely hydric, meaning it is essentially undevelopable, and without being able to receive the relief from the frontage requirement, it would be, it really would present a hardship without being able to do any additional type of development for the site. And in the current state of the cranberry industry, as we all know and have been talking about, being a resident of Carver myself for 20 years, and knowing that the cranberry industry makes up a significant component of our community, and we know that growers in our area are looking to diversify their use of the land. This presents an opportunity, possibly the only opportunity, to make use of what's out there, given the significant hydric soil conditions.
Talk to me about the frontage again, the frontage to the road.
The existing frontage? The existing frontage exists over on Forest Street. This combination of lots is listed in the Carver Assessors as 0 Fuller Street, which is where the existing access comes in for the operations through the abutting parcel. The frontage is 40 feet along Forest Street. This is not proposed. This is a residential area, a densely populated residential area. This would not be proposed for any sort of access to the site.
Where would you propose to access?
We would continue to access the site through the existing paved road. It goes
back to the bogs and...
Yes, so it's kind of hard to see, but there's a dark dash line on your plan that comes in from Fuller Street. that Mr. Johnson is able to use that from his neighboring property to access the entirety of the site.
So that land belongs to somebody else, but he's allowed to access
Correct.
his land through that.
Yep, correct. And that's been going on for ever.
Since 1990.
Is it a deeded right away?
No, but I get along with my neighbor, but it was never actually deeded to me.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
Van Johnson.
And you live
Property
where?
owner.
What's your address?
315 Purchase Street, Middleborough.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Nope, that's my other question.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if you were locked out of that road, you would be unable to access this property except by Forest Street, is that correct? Or is there already a road going in through there, or is that all trees?
The road she described is the main means of me getting in and out.
I get that. What's up on Forest Street?
That has never been used.
So that's just a treed lot?
It's a right of way. It's part of the lot.
Right, but
but
you
it's
can't
never
drive
been
in it
used.
right this minute is what
No.
I'm asking.
It's wooded.
You'd have to
It's
cut
wooded.
trees and
Right,
create
right.
an
We have
access
no-
road.
and just to be clear, we have no proposal to do that. There's nothing on the table to come into the site from that access point. It would be, if the project were to proceed, we would continue to use this. We would formalize an easement agreement with the neighbor. Right now, like many agricultural properties in Carver, people access over each other's land with a handshake agreement. We know that it's bog country, that's been going on for years. But if another project is added to the site, we've spoken to the neighbor and we would talk about formalizing that and memorializing that easement for the solar project to record that properly.
But if you did that, would you need this
Would you need a
opening?
variance?
We don't need an opening over here, we just don't have the frontage. That's all we're
But
asking
if you
about.
had an easement onto your property, a deeded easement onto the property, why would you need an access?
We're not asking for access.
They don't
We're
need
just,
Well,
the frontage
the
itself
frontage,
for
why
the
would you
lot.
need the frontage on the lot?
Well, that's the question I asked of the building commissioner. He didn't actually know if we did need it for a solar project, but the bylaw was not clear on that point. Which is why we're here. Do we need that 150-foot frontage? Do we need relief from that? We are here to
I see.
ask the question, and
Could you develop this property in the manner that your client would like without, or with the current access that you have?
yes,
And that's your plan?
yes. The only issue is that the lot configuration, the lines on paper, that 40 feet of frontage touching Forest Street does not meet the 150 for the RA district, and that's it.
So what you're saying is 213 acres of land and you technically don't have enough frontage to do anything with
Correct.
213 acres of land?
Correct.
Based on the current bylaw setup, but you're
That's
not
right.
even sure you need the variance if you get an agreement to use the existing access road.
Right, which we have confidence that we would get.
Well, you've been using it forever to
Right.
begin with, otherwise you'd
That's
be
right.
landlocked out, you couldn't get in to get your variance.
So your 40A argument, to switch up here for a second, really isn't based on soil, it's based on shape. You don't have enough frontage.
That's the next point. Soil, shape, topography, I mean, really, we kind of check all the boxes in terms of meeting the criteria for potential relief, if needed. But do you see the question? So we were sort of kicking this around with the commissioner and the planning director, and we were having this cyclical conversation of, well, but it's, for a solar project, do you need that lot to be conforming? And we all sort of said, we don't know. The bylaw didn't really help us answer the question. In the end, we decided to be conservative and come ask the question to the appropriate regulatory body.
At least in this interest, as opposed to the host one, they've come before us to figure out what they need, as opposed to
Right.
being granted all of the permits and then trying to figure out how
Right,
to
and if we
backfill.
went to the planning board with a site plan review special permit application, this became an issue, it would have been a problem to then try to backtrack. So this was just our first step, and wanted to make sure that we were taking the appropriate steps
Due diligence.
to make sure that, you know, everything
I gave your
is.
soil and your shape arguments. What about topography? You said that checks that box too? How?
What's what?
So the topography is not, not currently a problem, but because it is such low-lying land, it also presents a unique area in terms of limiting the developability or the use of this site for anything other than cranberry farming or adding a solar array. So the topography in terms of its low-lying elevation, which really kind of dovetails with the wetlands, whether they're cranberry bog created wetlands or naturally occurring wetlands, and you know, full of hydric soils and low elevation. So very limiting in terms of what's available here.
So if you can access this property now,
Yes.
let's imagine for a minute that this project goes forward. There's no intervention by this board. You can get your trucks up and down that current access road and do what you want anyway, without any relief from us, correct?
Correct.
So you're just being careful here.
Well, when you look at it on paper, it doesn't meet the letter of the law with the frontage criteria, and that's
Under the dimensional tables.
Correct.
So
Yes,
Is this a
2230.
large ground?
Yes.
mounted?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying now.
Have you spoken with Middleborough?
Middleborough?
Yeah.
It's all in Carver.
Yeah, but the line, is it right there? Do they have anything about their setbacks for the road? No? Oh, all right.
We would be working over here. We're so far away. We did notify abutters in Middleborough because there's a, 300-foot abutter notification requirement for this process, so that did go into Middleborough. So, but that would really be the only interaction with the adjacent town.
It's gonna be dual use or ground mount?
We don't know. It will preferably be a conventional array. We're going to discuss that at the Conservation Commission in terms of upland versus wetland bogs in this area. But the preference is for conventional.
But you haven't started going through site plan review with
We
that?
have not. No, this was a potential fatal flaw.
Right.
If we couldn't proceed, we think it makes sense given what they want to do on the site. Mr. Francis kind of initially said, no, that doesn't make sense, you don't need to have a conforming lot for this type of use. And I said, well, do we? And so we went back and forth, and here we are. So.
Well, the last time we granted a variance for a solar field, during site plan review, the planning board sued us.
Yes, I did that.
So,
I did that. One of the
let's
reasons.
talk about that.
Yes, one of the reasons I went informally in front of the planning board to get their input before filing this, because though I wasn't involved in that project, I had
You heard
heard
about it.
I did hear about it.
By the way, they dropped that lawsuit and decided not to fight us.
So I did speak with them about it. I showed them the plan. I told them what the situation was. They agreed it made sense to come here first, to the fact that we're not completely landlocked. We do have some frontage, just maybe not what a typical lot would have in this zoning district. So they are aware of this. They didn't have a problem with it. So we tried to check with everyone.
Any chance that you might be able to acquire the additional frontage that you need?
I don't think so.
Those are all houses.
Yeah, it's a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Anybody else up here have any questions or comments? Everybody good for now? Any members of the public, would they like to be heard with regard to this? I see no one willing to comment. I throw it back up here again for a moment or two. Anybody have any further issues?
You want to do a long walk? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, we should look at it two ways, because this is for a project that is not drawn up yet.
Correct.
You don't have a secret plan with all kinds of arrays hidden away
We do
somewhere?
not have a secret plan of any kind.
So they're asking for a variance, basically, that will allow them to go in front of the planning board with the public plan of all the arrays. But in order to satisfy the dimensional requirements of the bylaw, which requires 150 feet frontage, you only have 40, you need a variance of 110 feet. That's based on the shape of the lot, which
Right.
I kind of get. But this is for,
Something that might happen. It's for a
This is something-
project that hasn't been mapped
it
out.
hasn't been mapped out, it has, I mean, it's, again, it's a case of, if somebody came before us for a variance, saying, I think I might want to put a garage too close to my lot lines,
Yeah.
will show us a plan.
Right. I can tell you the bogs that we are targeting for the array, which is, or the only two that I labeled on here. That's
Bog
the,
1 and Bog 2.
Bog 1 and Bog 2. That's the plan as discussed with the landowner and the solar developer. Of course, that could change, but right now that's the plan. I will tell you, after working on many large scale ground mounted projects myself, this, whatever it ends up being, more than likely those two bogs, but if it, became something else, would be done in compliance with the solar bylaw, would be done in compliance with site plan review, going through it's all gonna be done.
Right, we're not handling anything to do
Right.
with the solar, the arrays, or any of that public hearing.
Right.
And the granting of the variance would not preclude the fact that you would be allowed to get this.
Yeah.
What I have some thoughts about, and the rest of the board can chime in, is that you've got a 40-foot, it looks like it's just trees from where the pictures that we have.
Right.
And you're saying there are no plans to turn that into a road.
Right.
What if we conditioned that it could not be a road?
Can you do that?
Yeah, we can.
Better yet, and hold your thought, Ms. Stearns.
Oh, I have a good answer though.
Okay, answer.
I already thought I had it.
This here is a massive vegetative wetland. If we tried to put a road in here, it would be underwater almost immediately. So it's really inaccessible.
I understand, but if, in my head, is that,
Things change.
well, things changed. Wetlands suddenly disappear sometimes. But also, Forest Street is, like you said, a highly residential area, and if suddenly trucks start going in and out of there that have not, even for construction.
Yeah, I would agree if there were an existing road there, but it's woods and wetlands, so I don't.
For me.
But
what if we said no road?
Sorry.
How would you feel about that?
What's that?
Not allowing, as part of the solar project, if it were to proceed, not allowing access from Forest Street.
You're asking me if...
I don't think we can get in that way anyway, but
It's not likely that they're gonna want it. It doesn't make
Again,
sense,
not
it doesn't make
likely,
sense for them
may
to
not
try to do that anyway.
All right, let me,
I don't think I have to say they can't because they wouldn't want to.
yeah,
It's
I
not
just don't think it can.
Ms.
logical
Clark
for them
started
to
with a very good
try to
point,
do
which
that.
is we have no plan.
Right.
So we're kind of flying blind here. And it is a rare case indeed, particularly for a project this size, that we will go to a vote on the merits without a plan. I think maybe, out of an abundance of caution, you guys come here, but maybe that's putting the cart a little bit before the horse. Maybe you need to go to the planning board, get your site plan review that will be based on some kind of definitive plan, and then you can come back before us.
Can they vote on a plan if they feel like it needs relief from the, I have a denial letter from the building commissioner at this point, so I feel like it's a non-starter with planning board, which is how we ended up here.
So then if that's the case, for me, speaking only for myself, I think I'd like to see a plan.
That's fine. What I will tell you, we were trying to not do a full engineering design before we knew we had a project or a viable
We do hash
site.
marks.
We can do, I can easily pull together a schematic plan that shows you what our thinking is.
We're not looking to put your client under any additional financial
Right.
pressure here. And I know
Right.
these things are expensive, so
Right.
I get that, but we gotta have something more than, for the file,
Okay.
before we can really begin to talk on the merits, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and we are happy to provide that. It's fluid at this point, but I can certainly, give
And
to
this
you
is
what
the
we're.
concern to my left, that things change and,
Right.
as the plan develops, you may decide to do this as opposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Ms. Miller?
Yeah.
I mean, we could be granting the variance for a solar project only. And then should it deviate from that, the variance is then null and void. I mean, you have a year to act on it anyway.
Yeah, I
so-
think that's a great way to do it. And, part of our application does talk about a 5 megawatt plan.
Right,
So we did specify that, and that's what we're basing it on.
Right.
And to me, it shouldn't really matter for this conversation if it's here or here. It's just, is this a permissible site to then go through the permitting process for a 5 megawatt project on a 200+ acre site? So that's really why we're here tonight. And I can put together a schematic plan so you can have a visual, but I
Does
mean,
everybody
again,
feel as if a schematic plan for the file would be,
The schematic plan has worked fine for me.
I would just like to go back to that 40-foot access being shut off, to not disrupt the neighborhood, that moving forward with your plan, you'd have to get the easement to get in on the road you're currently going on.
yes. I mean, I don't have any issue with that. It's inaccessible from where the
It
actual
is, but
frontage is.
20 years down the road, because these things stay up generally about 20 years.
Yeah.
But 20 years down the road, I still don't want to see a road plowed in there because,
Right.
because this variance, should it be granted, is specific for this solar field only.
Right.
And no other reason you're in front of us. You've been growing cranberries there for, I don't know, 100 years?
A long time.
And you've never needed a variance at this
Right.
point. Now you do for a very specific purpose, and we should, if we choose to grant it, we should be able to craft it right around that with no wiggle room.
I think that's
And
fine.
it wouldn't, other than granting the variance and meeting the dimensional bylaw requirement, that will have no bearing on whatever planning board decides to do.
Yeah.
Other than meeting the dimensional requirement.
Right.
And making Mr. Francis happy.
Yep. Agreed.
Mr. Jermaine?
On a note, on my other hat, I found that every time that Sarah Stearns has come before conservation, her presentation is impeccable and her integrity is just as impeccable.
Thank you.
So, as far as I'm concerned, you've never steered us wrong. On the same note, when this finally winds up in front of conservation, there's no way in God's green earth that conservation is gonna issue anything and allow anything to happen to that 40 feet of frontage.
Agreed.
It's wetlands, they're never gonna allow that to be touched in any way, shape, form, manner, period.
Yeah. No,
Forever
yes.
and ever and ever, amen, and that's gonna come down right, and you know that's exactly what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I can see it coming also. I will defer to the, drawing, the sketch they want to have. I have no problem with it pertaining to the solar array only. And I understand why you're trying to dot your i's and cross your t's so this doesn't come back and bite you after you spent $15,000 in engineering costs to find out, oops, you should have done this, and no, you can't have it now.
Yeah.
So I get all of that, but I think there are a tremendous amount of other safeguards that are built into this just by simple fact of the butters from the neighborhood are gonna attack you at planning board. Conservation's gonna be very concerned with all that wet area that's right there, and they'll probably wanna do a site walk. And, that's gonna be soaking wet. There'll never be a road that'll be able to be blasted in there from conservation as well as from ZBA, so. Yeah, I'm good with what you guys want.
Okay. Anything further from anybody up here? Ms. Stearns, final comments?
No. Actually, I guess I would just like to ask the board's collective opinion on the need for relief on this.
I won't declare a judgment ahead of time. I won't.
You're here, so somebody higher up sent you here. We don't go out looking for cases.
Right.
We're not proactive, we only react to what's in front of us.
Yeah.
So,
And we
It was
don't
just
make
ambiguous enough
decisions.
to-
We don't give indications or make decisions until we're ready to make decisions.
Yep.
So we don't declare judgments ahead of time.
Alright. It was just ambiguous in the bylaw enough that I just was hoping we made the right call, so.
So,
what's our next meeting?
our next meeting date, let's have a motion to continue to our next meeting date of December
Second.
2nd.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
No, it's December 3rd.
Whatever.
Is the next meeting date, is December 3rd at 7 PM.
Tuesday, December 3rd.
Amend that motion.
Amend the motion.
Ms. Mello,
Agreed.
she amends the motion to continue the case to December 3rd. All in favor?
Aye.
And Ms. Stearns, would you please provide us with a reasonably detailed schematic?
Yes, would you like that ahead of time? Or at the next hearing?
At the next hearing.
That's fine.
If the board would like, I could email it to the planning department if you would like ahead of time. I can send her a PDF through Jill.
That's fine.
Okay. 7 PM?
Yep.
Ms. Johnson, do you understand what just happened here tonight?
Oh, yeah.
We need a little bit more detail. We don't have a
Hey,
plan.
I'm just a landowner, and I'm kind of understanding it. It's a long process, you guys know it.
Well, we don't drag our feet.
This is all things that
I
they...
do want to ask Ms. Stearns a question, however. Is there a time frame here that we need to be aware of
Meaning,
to get this project commenced?
the sooner the better.
I mean, the law changes and you get certain credits and
Yes.
so on and so forth. Do we need to be cognizant of any of this?
Well, as you're aware, the SMART program blocks continue to fill up. My client, as I mentioned in my presentation, we did file in August and, decided that since the board had such a full agenda, further meetings to wait until we could
You're not
find a
answering
spot.
that question.
Well,
I'm assuming, and I don't want to speak for everybody up here, but if we have all our questions answered the next time and the schematic has been sent in, we'll probably go to some sort of judgment on this case. Is that okay?
Yes.
Or is there some other pressing prerogative in terms of time that we need to be aware of that would require us to meet ahead of the next meeting of December 3?
If there's an opportunity to meet in November, we would very much appreciate that.
But if not, December 3 is okay?
I'm gonna run it by my client, he's not here.
Okay, we'll keep it for December 3, keeping in mind that there's an intervening holiday, and a lot of people will be
Yes.
taking time off.
Right, okay.
So we'll see you back on December 3, barring something unusual, and you folks will get us the schematic. Then I
Thank you.
expect we'll be able to move forward on the merits.
Great.
Thanks for the presentation tonight, it was illuminating. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any correspondence that we need to be aware of that haven't already referenced with regard to these cases?
Thank you.
No? All right. Does anybody want to raise any other issues before I mention something here at the end? Yes or no? Everybody good?
Good.
All right. The chair declares that there has been a recent development with regard to some pending litigation in which the Zoning Board of Appeals is peripherally involved. So I am declaring that there is a need for a brief executive session to address this very recent development. I declare for the purpose of wanting this executive session that there could be some subjects that are revealed that could compromise the nature of the pending litigation. And we will need to discuss some strategy during the course of that executive session. And if we were to go public on this, that discussion could have a detrimental effect, again, on that pending litigation of which the zoning board and by extension the town of Carver is involved currently. So I would like to declare the need for an executive session. And having done so, I would also indicate for the record that we will not be returning to an open public session once we're done with that executive session. We will adjourn for the evening after the brief executive session is done and over with. I now want to go to a roll call vote and ask each member if they are in agreement to go into a brief executive session with regard to this case, which I should reference is the case of Caparella and the Caparella Family Trust versus the Carver Zoning Board of Appeals, and by extension, the town of Carver, in land court case docket number 19 MISC 000360. Ms. Mellon.
Agreed.
Mr. Mueller.
Agreed.
Mr. Germain.
Agreed.
Ms. Clark.
Aye.
And Mr. Poirier.
Agreed.
So we will now go into an executive session. Ladies and gentlemen at home, thank you for tuning in tonight, and we look forward to everybody viewing in during our next meeting on December 3. Good evening, everybody.